Welcome to Talking Absolute Worship. Last week we looked at the feeding of the 5,000 and there were baskets of leftovers. We've had a good rummage around in the baskets of leftovers and assembled this glorious panel to help us think about the readings for this coming week. Lithan, where were you thinking of going?
I don't know, it sounded more like the beginning of I'm sorry I haven't a clue every week. I'm not sure I have this week. I am a bit all over the place. Because there's so much, isn't there, with both Exodus and John and referring to each other, and then another awesome bit from Paul in Ephesians. So I'm going to start where you'd expect with Michael McIntyre. So I'm going to share my screen, put the sound on, and I will have to warn you.
This early, yes.
I know. I have to warn you that he'll say at least one word we don't often hear in church. You could stop the clip before the word comes, but I like what he said after. So the context of this is Michael McIntyre is live somewhere in Wales. And I'm hoping I'll have got to the bit that's now, sadly, he tells a joke about the Severn crossing that doesn't work anymore because the tolls have gone. And then, hopefully, he will do this if he behaves. Thank you. Will you just get on with it? Oh, and it's gone back. So I will just have to find there. Sorry about this. Bear with me. I had set it all up nicely.
Bread of heaven, bread of heaven. You're insane. You do know that, don't you? You are insane. Most of you look at me as if to say, oh, thank God the comedy's over. It's just like chapel. I love it. I love a good sing-song. This is great. This is absolutely great. I could not go to a theatre in the whole of England and go out and go, dear Lord and Father of mankind, piss off. Very unlikely. Forgive our foolish ways. We were like, oh, I love it, bread of heaven. In fact, if I had some bread earlier from heaven, it's all right, bread of heaven. Are you all right? I'm full up on bread of heaven. Me, I love that you sing it at the rugby, don't you?
I won't go on with the rugby story is funny too, but it's more so that just that thing of being Welsh, and that is exactly what happens if you start singing bread of heaven. Welsh people will continue in harmony, but that kind of, and feed me till I want no more. And that's kind of what we want. And that's kind of what happens with Jesus, where he's fed them. There's leftovers. We don't know what happens to the leftovers. They've obviously eaten them because Jesus crosses the lake by walking on the water. When they go, oh, we're a bit hungry now, we've eaten the leftovers, where's Jesus gone? And I love that, it's like a little comedy thing, isn't it, where they follow right round, they come around and go, yay, now I want breakfast, we want some more food, please. And he goes, it's not about the food. And I think last week we said this a little bit, it's not about the food. If you listen to Kermode and Mayo talking about films, they talk about Jaws a lot, and Mark Kermode says it's not about the shark. This is Jesus going, it's not about the food. Me feeding you is not the thing about being physically fed. And they're going, oh, but we want you to feed us now. And he goes, no, I can feed you, but it won't be with bread and fish or bacon sandwich, or not bacon sandwiches, or sausage and beef patty, whatever. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give you the food that doesn't perish. And I go, oh, but we'll follow you. Do us a miracle. Go on. Moses did miracles. He gave them food to eat. And Jesus went, no, that was God. God gave them the food in the desert. When they were, it was unexpected. Suddenly they were going, oh, life was better as it was, wasn't it? Well, it was great. Yeah, we had to work a lot. Yeah, we got beaten up a bit, but at least we got food every night. And he says, look, God gave the manna, but that wasn't real bread from heaven. I'm the bread. I'm the bread from heaven. I am all you need, but it's not about the food. And that's kind of where that the song where it goes, feed me till I want no more. No, that's not what God isn't saying, follow me and you will always be full. That's not the right thing at all. And of course, the people moaned in the desert. They moaned even after they had the manna. They moaned because they had to pick it up every day. They couldn't store it up. They had to work. They moaned then because they didn't have enough water to wash down. All the things God was giving them, the manna and the quail, and it still wasn't enough. And I think there's something here about saying it's time to grow up. It's like you can't just go, I want you to feed me. Oh God, I'm going to lay here and you do everything for. No, that's not how it should be. I currently live in a place where it feels like there's a lot of entitled people who that's how they live their life. They want you to do everything for them. You can put things, they'll go, yeah, that sounds great. But there's almost an expectation that people will come to things as long as you ring them up, text them, remind them, go to their door, ring the bell, say, come on and join me. And you can't live life like that. At some point, we have to grow up and look for the bread that satisfies. And I wonder if there's something about coming out of lockdown where we've been in a time where we've sort of been wandering in the wilderness, where we have got used to suiting ourselves because we've had nothing. We've moaned because it's boring being in the house, not seeing anyone else, but we haven't had to make many decisions. We've been fed, we've pleased ourselves, and we've moaned. And I think there's something about the fact that God does provide. And last week we talked about we do have enough, but it's not about just sitting there like little birds with our mouths open. We actually, if we're following Jesus and know he's the bread of life, that's something that we kind of have to take on board and live with, which is where the Ephesians comes in. And he says, live a life worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with humility and gentleness and patience, bearing with one another in love, which is not always easy, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. I won't say more about that now, but it's kind of, that's what being grown up is about. And I think accepting that Jesus is the bread of life, that in him is enough, but it's not about the fact that he will, when he says, give us our daily bread, it's not about the bread. It's about, give us as much as we need, but that actually we have our part to play in all of this as well. And maybe when Jesus sings bread of heaven, we should be joining in, feed me till I want no more, but there's much more to it than that.
Or if you're not Welsh, feed me now and evermore. But there we are. I think the feed me till I want no more is more faithful to the to the passage, isn't it? Really, it's because it's about hunger being satisfied, and I want no more is the state that they achieved after the feeding of the 5,000. Rather, feed me now and evermore suggests this is an ongoing free meal. You could have whatever they like. I don't know. I heard pretty much everything you said until you said that Jaws wasn't about the shark. I think if you fed that to a congregation, you'd probably have to stop them spending the entire rest of the time thinking, it is about the shark. What's she on about? There's a poster with a great big shark. It's there you go. I'm sure Mayo meant and Kermode meant something subtle about
you have to
shark.
know your audience, whether it's worth throwing that in or not.
No, you lost me with the shark. It's
Yeah.
about the shark. I'm afraid Jaws is about the shark. Sorry, Ruth, you've got something more sensible to say.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've written at the bottom of my piece of page, this is not just about food, which really was as I read them all and thought about them all. Yeah, so I'm glad Jesus says that too, because that makes me think I might be onto something, that it's not just about food. And I'm reminded as you talk, Lithan, about Jesus as the bread of life, Jesus as the one we go to, and our kind of growing up into Christ, in the words of Ephesians. It reminded me of a debate a long time ago I had with somebody who said that the language of letting Jesus into our life should be being let into the life of Jesus. And we had a long discussion about it. It's both. I mean, it always is, isn't it? It's a little bit yes and a little bit no. But that idea that Jesus is the bread of life and Jesus does feed us and God does provide what we need, but that isn't meant to keep us in this state of infantile, so we just sit in the high chair and go as the spoon goes near us. That idea that we're also growing up into Christ, so it becomes being fed by Jesus, the bread of life, is not just about food, and it's not just about being kept in a state of a particular sort of dependence, but it's about recognizing the dependence and growing into something that's more like interdependence, I think. But it's definitely worth reminding ourselves of the journey that the disciples make in their heads. I found that really helpful to think through that story for them, to help us to make the same journey in our heads too.
I think that makes a good strap line to hang this thing on. It's not about the bread. I think that works well. It prompts in the congregation the question, well, what is it about then? And I had a note in the margin of this that says Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I was thinking Jesus clearly understood you needed to feed a hungry crowd physically. That's like basic needs number one, and he does that, but they don't progress up the pyramid. They don't then begin to recognize their, in inverted commas, higher needs. They just come back for more basic needs, and it's a question I think the church faces quite significantly, doesn't it? In that I don't think we're that bad. If thinking nationally and the way the URC has contributed during COVID in various ways at feeding basic need, I think we find that easy in some ways. It's the easier thing to do, and it's quite a little bit comforting to find that Jesus also found it really frustrating. So I'm finding it really easy to feed the 5,000, but to get them to understand any need beyond that, I'm hitting a brick wall. And I think that's it's comforting in a way that Jesus struggled with it. But I think the church certainly does, and it's a question that this opens up for us. Yeah, Henriette.
Yeah, I recognize very much what you're saying, Phil, and what Litman is saying as well about this. It's not about the food, and we need to grow up. That's a brilliant link, I think, because especially here in the Southwest, I think we are often in privileged positions. And what you say, Litman, about people almost sitting comfortably saying that, feed us, feed us, feed us. And it's in that growing up comes in that speaking the truth in love as well, isn't it? But it still has to be the truth of what we're saying. And it is a truth that even when it is spoken in love, it can be pretty painful and pretty scary to have to say it, and pretty painful to have to hear it. But yeah, I love that idea of it is not about the food. And what you're saying, Phil, I think we as churches, we love that idea of, we find that the easy bit. Let's feed the poor. And it goes right back to that saying of Jesus, you always have the poor with you. And that will be the easiest part of your job. And in a way, I sometimes feel, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here a little bit, but I sometimes do feel that we actually love as churches the fact that there are poor in the world, and that for that reason, we do not use our prophetic voice loud enough to say, no, the food banks is an outrage, because actually deep down, maybe we are a little bit too much in love with the food banks, because it makes us look and feel really, really good when we do that kind of work. So sorry, that was just
I think there's
a little soapbox that I climbed up.
Truth in that. Absolutely, it was the same with fair trade, wasn't it? And when supermarkets started selling fair trade, the churches were anguished about it. Does that mean we have to close our fair trade store? How dare they sell fair trade goods in the supermarket? Yeah, Ruth.
Yes, I too. I hope there's room on your soapbox for me as well.
Oh yes, come and
I
join.
think, I mean, I hear churches say things like, well, we feed people, and then when they ask us why we're doing it, we can point them to Jesus. And I like the idea that even Jesus found it difficult for people not to just be thinking about the bread. So it is, we have got to think about how we're going to do it. It's not enough to say, so there's your food bank. So, and when you say, gosh, that's lovely, thank you, why are you doing that? We can say, oh, because of Jesus. And then we can have the conversation. But if we're not fighting for justice, why would they want to know about Jesus if Jesus is just the reason why we're nice people? I don't think that's enough.
Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in you. And some of that is having the language to say that. And I wonder whether that's one of the de-skillings of our congregations that has happened over the centuries, maybe the inability to put into words what is this hunger that Jesus satisfies. And so if somebody said, well, we've given you bread, so you're no longer physically hungry, but you're still hungry for something, and they say, what am I hungry for? And we say, well, Jesus. And it's not really an answer, is it? And then they say, well, what were you hungry for then? What deep hungry need has Jesus satisfied in you? And if we're unable to give an answer to that or try and put that into words, then we're not really helping people understand. What is it? What is this deep hunger beyond food? If it's not about the food, what is it about? Well, it's about Jesus. isn't really the answer, is it? So I think it's quite challenging. I think this is quite challenging because it moves on from last week, which was about abundance and food. And this is about Jesus saying, okay, there's more to me than this. This isn't primarily what I'm about. Oh, Henriette, what direction were you going to go with these readings?
Well, you just set me up really brilliantly there with what you were saying. And because I looked at Exodus and at the Psalm, and it struck me because, well, I have a bit of a thing about just getting part of a Psalm and say, okay, this is the reading. And many people in church will not have a clue what the rest of the Psalm or the reading is about. So I would want to set the Psalm in the whole of the Psalm and make sure that people know that it is actually a reciting of what God has done throughout the centuries and how Israel and, we connected with Israel are just not doing our part of the story, but God keeps God's part of the story again and again and again. And that it is this thing that grounds us today, that it is the story, the history that grounds us today. And in this setting of we remember the past, so the collective memory and our experiences of today form our expectations for the future. And I feel that Psalm 78 is much about that. And linked with that is the Exodus reading of how do we remember our past? Is it this thing like, oh, it was so great, we had flesh pots and lots of bread, and slavery was great, and it was the golden age when we had 5 million children in the church, and that kind of thinking. But at the same time, it is super important to remember our history in order to have a story to tell. Why do we do what we do? Is it just, well, because of Jesus? Well, but why? Because of Jesus, And what has Jesus done for us? What has God done for us throughout the ages, throughout the centuries? And what is our experience today? And therefore, what can our hope be and our expectation be for the future? So that was that was the kind of direction I wanted to go to. And perhaps I wasn't quite sure yet whether I would go that or into the Ephesians reading with all the gifts. But I think you can easily link the gifts to God's faithfulness throughout the centuries and link that together somehow. But I haven't quite got that clear in my head yet of how to do that. But one of the things that struck me in one of the commentaries that I read is that what this psalm makes so clear is that absolutely nothing that we do as humans, our mistrust of God, our unfaithfulness, our rejection of God, absolutely nothing can actually throw God off course of providing for us. And so in a way, God rejects our rejection and says, no, I am going to provide for you anyway. And I am going to make sure that you are going to be all right. Even in times when God seems to get a little bit peeved with us as well, God is still going to provide. And so this commentary was saying, and it is that sharing of stories and that sharing of our history of God's faithfulness that grounds us in the today, that helps us to wander in our own wilderness. And it was pointing out to how that was what gave Jesus the strength when he was in the wilderness. That it wasn't a super stoic thing of, no, I don't need bread, and oh no, I'm not going to test God. But that it was the stories and the histories and this ongoing repeat of what God has done for the generations that made him think, you know what, I am in the wilderness, but there are other ways. It's not about the bread. It is about growing up. Now that was a link that I had not seen before, but that is what the commentary meant. It is not about the physical bread. It is about growing up and about the truth. And so those kind of ideas are playing around in my head. A little bit fumbled and muddled up still, as you can hear, but yeah.
Brilliant. Yep, listen.
Again, it depends on your context, but if you're in a reasonably small congregation, it's such a good opportunity then to say, right, tell us a story of where God has blessed your life. Or how did you come to faith to start with? Was it because you were brought to church, but what actually made it something that you own? And if you're and quite a few of our churches are small enough to do that, it could be an exciting project. You could just say, right, the next few weeks, that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to each other, maybe read the psalm every week and just talk about, how have we seen this at work in our lives?
Yeah, I like that. I think I share Henriette's frustration with some of the psalm settings. It's always frustrating to have a reading that starts yet or however. I mean, you'd never start a story with however, because you think, well, what do you mean? What? Because it implies something before, doesn't it? That your party to in the congregation isn't, as they quickly whip out their phones and look up Psalm 78. But in a dramatic contrast to last week, this will be my first preaching service in a new pastorate. I go straight from one into the other, and that kind of feels different. And that, I think, what Lithan's saying there might be a very helpful way into engaging with a new pastorate from my perspective, reflecting on. We're from different places. I've arrived in this congregation. What is our common story? Where are we coming from? What streams of stories do we share? Where are they flowing? I'm getting a bit carried away with the rivery stuff now. That's flesh pots. We probably ought to just dwell on flesh pots, because flesh pots means something now that it didn't mean back then. Just to be clear.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm the immigrant here. You will have to explain that to me, please.
I think flesh pots back then just meant a pot with meat in it.
Yeah.
That's a cauldron with meat. Whereas nowadays, were you to use the flesh pots of Totnes or something, flesh pots of Taunton, the famous flesh pot towns, you would mean a den of sexual.
The red light district.
Red light district, and it'd definitely be a sexual overtone to flesh pots, where enticing sexual encounters might be found. So that's not what they're talking about in Egypt, because that really would be a fanciful vision of what they'd come from. They used to sit outside the flesh pots. There you go. We had lacy bras last week, so just continuing the theme. Ruth, you look like you're about to impart wisdom and knowledge about these readings. So let's move on. Where were you thinking of going?
Trying not to be distracted. Yes, I mean, the Psalm, thank you, Henriette, for reminding us about the whole of Psalm 78. And all the things that God has done are related in the Psalm. And I thought we miss out. We haven't even got verses 21 and 22. And Phil will be pleased because it starts with therefore. But it's God's done all this stuff, but the people complain. Therefore, when the Lord heard, he was full of rage. A fire was kindled against Jacob. His anger mounted against Israel because they had no faith in God and did not trust his saving power. Yet, and then the bit we've got, he commanded the skies and opened the doors, and there was manna and grain and bread of angels and meat and winged birds and all of that. So I think there's something about that made me think, oh, but you're allowed to lament, but God doesn't like it when you complain. This seems to be kind of what this is saying. But then I looked at the Exodus and found out, because clever people have written clever commentaries, that when it says that the people murmured in Exodus, and in some translations that's grumbled, and in some it's complained, that's a word that's only found in the wilderness wandering texts. So it's a particular kind of it's not lament, because when you lament, you turn to God and you say, "Look, I'm hungry. Look, I'm thirsty." But you're in communication with God. The problem with this sort of murmuring, grumbling, complaining is it's just as if God isn't there, God isn't listening, God isn't part of the conversation, and just between us, we were better off in the flesh pots of Egypt, eating from the pots of flesh, obviously, in Egypt. And that made me think, so there's something, because then God wasn't angry because they said they were hungry, and he wasn't angry, his fire wasn't kindled because they should have found their own quails. It was because they had no faith in God. So there's something about turning away and turning to. You can turn to God and complain, or you can turn away from God and complain about him. And that seems to be the difference of what's going on. So then when we go to Exodus, sorry, I've got to have the thing in front of me, because the other very clever lectionary thing is that was pointing out that in verse 9, Moses said to Aaron, so they've had their complaint, and the Lord says, yeah, I'm going to rain down bread and that'll be fine, you'll be fine. So then Moses tells them, when the Lord gives you meat to eat in the evening and your fill of bread in the morning, because the Lord has heard the complaining that you utter against him. So there's that idea again, it's about muttering to, not complaining. Your complaining is not against us, says Aaron. It's not against Moses and Aaron. Oh, sorry, there's Moses. Not against Moses and Aaron, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the Israelites, draw near to the Lord, for he has heard your complaining. So there's something about turning back to God that's happening here. And the lectionary suggested that there's a relationship between that draw near to God and the idea of the tent of meeting, where Moses went to meet with God. Now, I didn't bother writing down and trying to transliterate the Hebrew bits, because that would only imply that I speak Hebrew, to which I can only say shalom. But I'm not going to pretend a deep knowledge of the Hebrew, but I think there is in here the idea that now you've got to turn back to God, not just come to God with your complaints, but recognize you are meant to be in relationship with God. And when you're in relationship with God, God can sort out your complaints. When you just turn away from God and complain about stuff, you're stuck, because you need that faith in God and the relationship with God. So there's something about a lack of trust. So one of my answers to this is not about food, so what is it about? It's about lack of trust and lack of turning to God. And then I went back to Ephesians and thought, so we are growing into Christ as we are fed on our relationship with Christ. But growing into Christ means, does it, that we are the bread of life? Because Jesus says, I'm the bread of life, whoever comes to me. So there's that idea again of turning to, being in relationship with. But we as the body of Christ need to be that which people are able to relate to and come to and be fed by. And I thought, gosh, that's quite a challenge, to be those who feed others. And not just with bread, which we can do with food banks and feel better about ourselves. It's a much more serious call. It's a call to feed others with life, which means that we do get involved in all that justice stuff, because that's how we feed people with life. We don't just give them a loaf of bread that will see them through a couple of days. We fight with them for justice so that they're not hungry. That's about feeding people with eternal life, which was what the vision that Jesus was trying to give us of the kingdom. So you might think, gosh, that's a long and involved sermon, because I don't think it's a sermon yet. But that's some of the direction that I'm going in. Is I don't want people to go away with the sense that grumbling is wrong and God will punish you. But being in relationship with God is what then sorts out some of the other stuff and then gives us this challenge to be people of life and people of justice.
I think that's a really helpful distinction, and not one I'd come across before. The types of grumbling, and I wonder if it's the sort of grumbling that ministers might hear on Zoom when you say you're going to go into breakout rooms. That kind of, what's he doing there? And you're not directly engaging with the person leading the session. You're just doing a side chat to several people going, breakout room, we don't do that. I think it's a useful distinction to make. I'm quite happy. Of course, I'm going to have to go and look it up now, because there was another incident that we covered a few months ago on Talking Absolute Worship where the people grumbled, and God didn't give in this time in the same way. He sent snakes, which sorted them out. And then God had to fix that with a snake on a stick, and all of that whole narrative. So it's quite complex, isn't it? You're frowning with them.
I'm just trying to think what order they come in.
Oh,
Did they get grumbles and the bread first, and then still grumble and the snakes come, or is it the other way around? I have a feeling it's they get fed first and then the snakes come later. So even when they've got enough bread, as I said, they grumble about not having enough water, and they grumble generally, and the snakes come.
Yeah, God's had enough of the grumbling by this time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm reminded, and I didn't find it to share as a link because it's an earworm. There's a Passover song, Dayenu, It Is Enough.
Yeah.
Which is, and it's just brilliant. I think it's brilliant humour, because it kind of said, if God had just given us the law and not led us in the wilderness, it would have been enough. If God had just led us in the wilderness and not given us food to eat, it would have been enough. And if God had just given us food to eat and not also sent us, it goes on and on and on and on, all the things, and it's like it would have been enough. But it is a very, very catchy tune, which if I sing now, it will be in my head for the rest of the day. So that's why I'm not. But you can look it up, Dayenu, and there are some very, very funny versions of it on YouTube, of people singing. And once you've got it in your head, and I love there's a kind of a use of the levity of that. If God hadn't done all these amazing things, it would still have been enough, because there's always another amazing thing around the corner. But that reminder that this is the God who just keeps in relationship with us and keeps turning up and doing these wonderful things. I like that. And even though I haven't sung it, it's still starting to play in my head. So I'm just going to go and think about something else.
I don't know if this is an unhelpful caricature or not, but I always have in my head an idea that Judaism has that where Christianity doesn't. That attitude of humor with God, that sometimes as the Christian church has become a bit po-faced about it. That might be a bit of an overgeneralization, but it's there, isn't it? That humorous, well, humor in adversity. I think it's not just let's have a laugh. It's it's a positive humor in a relationship with God that's a difficult relationship, and it's acknowledged as a difficult relationship. It's an argumentative faith, isn't it? Which I'm really quite attracted by. This whole don't just sit and obey and we'll all be meek. It's a give and take thing, isn't it? An argument with God, which I think is really healthy. That goes on there. Okay, Henriette.
I find it really helpful, the link that you made, Ruth, between that complaining and turning away from God, and that we need to turn back to God first. That's I find that a really rich thought that you brought up. Yeah, there is profound life in that. I feel, to explore that with a congregation.
It's quite good to, I think, to preach this. I don't know if people do series anymore, because often we find ourselves in different places from week to week, don't we? But it's almost like a twin set with last week, isn't it? And there are echoes from last week's when Henriette was talking about abundance and scarcity and enough, and we've talked about enough again today, and that's certainly present in the whole Exodus reading. This really quite strong and powerful idea that the manna is there and there's enough for today, and it's no good hoarding any. And if you do, it just rots away. That you have to have. There's an element of faith about it. You have to have faith that God's grace will be new every morning, as it says elsewhere. And some of them don't, and it rots away under their pillow because they've stashed away. Just in case God can't be depended upon, I'll fill my little tin with a bit more just in case I need it. And God's saying you don't need it, and I've designed it so that it doesn't last more than a day, which of course kind of overflows into the Lord's Prayer, doesn't it? And Jesus uses that language of give us this day our daily bread, which is enough for today. It doesn't mean to give us bread every day. It's give us enough for today. That's what they discovered on that shopping list, wasn't it? With that excavation, the other use of this word for daily bread was on a shopping list, which meant enough for today. The day's bread. I don't know how much that was. One loaf. I don't know. 3 slices. Whatever your ration is for the day, that's enough, and that's all you need. So yeah, if you're in a position to preach in the same place 2 weeks in a row, there's a kind of like a 2-week bridge here, isn't there, between these readings that I think is quite helpful. Quite often we put the manna one alongside the feeding of the 5,000 anyway, but that wasn't the way the lectionary worked this time, which was interesting. So there are other ways that we can feed this deep hunger that isn't about bread for our congregations, and that's to use art and poetry and drama and music and all sorts of other things. So Lithan, what have you found?
I'm going to share 2 different sorts of music, so I will share screen and try and skip Michael McIntyre. Let's see if I can get past him. Right, so this is the member of Peter, Paul and Mary called Noel. And
Noel Stookie.
It is Noel Stookie, yes. How did you know that? Oh yeah, it says it on the thing. And this song is called Then the Quail Came. And there's no video of it, it's just the sound. So, and what I love about the song is the first 2 verses are, there we were, talking about us in the wilderness. And again, that's a very Jewish idea that it's us who experience all of these things. So there we are in the desert. So there we were, hungry and scared, wishing we'd never come. And then the quail came falling like dew on the ground, and we'll hear that bit. Then there we were, angry and naked, looking for someone to blame. It's the second verse. And then the last verse, which I won't share, but I'll read out now. Here we are, alone on a desert, fed dawn to dark, dusk to day. Every morning we wake up to find just the measure of food we need for the way. Or once we would ask if we could have more to see that our future survived. But we know now at last that nothing is sure except that at evening the quail will arrive. So here's a little bit of this song, hopefully.
There we were, hungry and scared, wishing we never had come. Homes on our backs, dust in our hair, cursing the day we'd begun. Oh, tell me, I ask you, a friend of mine said, was it so bad where we were? We didn't have to come here to be dead. Was what we had so unsure? Then the quail came, falling like the dew on the ground. The quail came, each evening our food to be found, and taking our curses and turning them round, and filling our ears with those ungrateful sounds, unworthy to stand. I bow down.
And then what I did was, because I didn't have much to offer, I just put a couple of keywords into Google and see what would happen. And I found treasure. So I found the Porter's Gate Worship Project. And these are a series of musicians who've put together 4 lots of songs on different themes. So one theme is about neighbours. So this song comes from their Neighbours EP, and you can get quite a lot of the songs on YouTube. And I haven't found one I don't like yet, and I've listened to quite a few since yesterday. I do get obsessions, and they're just, they're kind of in between what I'd call the worship songs with the big auditoriums and hymns. They're in that kind of in-betweeny place. So this song is Jesus, Bread of Life. And again, I'll play just the verse, and it's worth hearing the chorus because I think it's beautiful. So I hope you enjoy this as well. So it's Jesus, Bread of Life, manna from heaven.
Jesus, bread of life, manna from heaven, broken for the world, offered up for every man. The feast of angels becomes food for the weary, and hungry hearts are filled when you open up your hand, when you open up your hand. Oh Lord, come fill us with your love. This table laid for us, there is more than enough. Jesus, bread of life.
Very nice. Okay, that's nice. There's loads of music in here. Rejoice and Sing good old staple. There we are. Rejoice and sing. Has Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah in Welsh. So following on from Lythan's story, in fact the Welsh words are first in the music book. I'm not Welsh. I married into Welsh, so I try my best, but I'm a poor substitute for the real thing. Arglwydd arwain drwy'r aniolach. Fi bererin gwael ai fydd, or something like that. You could get your congregation to have a go. We're still thinking Pentecost here. Some of them might be able to do that because they're Welsh, and some of them might enjoy pretending to be Welsh as we sing "Guide Me, O Thou Great Jehovah." So that's obviously in there, and an obvious go-to. I've got now just one thing. And I don't even need the sound on this one, do I? No, I don't. Because I was kind of struck by the I am. This is obviously one of the I am sayings. I am the bread of life, and I was a little bit struck by the I am the bread of life. That's only half the sentence. You who come to me will never be hungry. Is part 2 of the sentence, isn't it? It's clause 1 and clause 2. I am the bread of life. Those who come to me will never be hungry. I am the true vine. You who come to me will never thirst. And I wondered whether there might be some mileage in going around these 7 I ams and asking the question, what hunger do they address in us, in humanity? I am the light of the world. Those who, and these aren't written in the Bible, but I'm now speculating. I am the light of the world. Those who come to me will never be in darkness. I am the gate. Those who come to me will never be shut out. I am the good shepherd. Those who come to me will never be lost. And I am the resurrection and the life. Those who come to me will never be dead. And the Bible does say that. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And that's about being lost again, maybe. I don't know. But I wondered if there's something in there about naming the key human hungers, about being lost, about being in the darkness, about being shut out, about being abandoned, about being hungry, about being thirsty, about being dead, and whether there's a sort of an I am-y type sermon in that, because I kind of think I'm leaning towards this whole question: what is this hunger if it's not about the bread? What is it? And what are the hungers that people are feeling? And how do you get people to talk about the hunger that they have that isn't satisfied by the world telling them that they just need another shampoo and everything will be fine, or they just need to lose a bit of weight, or they just need this, or there's something that you need to remove the hunger? And Jesus says, no, it's deeper than that. But what is it? How do we name it? How do we describe it? So I that's not fully formed yet, but I think it might be a direction I go. The other thing that I had, interestingly, was Paul Stookie. So there you go. Me and the missus think alike. I don't know whether the quails came already dead, dropping from the skies, raining from the skies, or whether it was a flock of quail every evening that landed and then they had to go out and grab them quick. Quite how the quail worked, maybe people don't need to worry about, but it's the sort of thing that plagues my mind. I want to know the details. The quail came, we're going to go and catch them now, which should make some people grumble, maybe. I don't know. Why can't he serve them up ready cooked? That'd be quite nice, and already plucked. And quail are quite small, aren't they? And who knows if it was actually quail or whether that's just a translation problem, knowing what kind of small bird it was. Lythan's laughing at me now. There you go. You've never caught a quail, have you? I mean, chickens are hard enough, but quail are hard to catch. They're little things and quite speedy.
No, I have the cartoon song "Catch the Pigeon" in my head now, which, if you're a certain age and British, you may not know that, Henriette. But there was when we were children, there was a "Catch the Pigeon" with a very catchy tune. Not as quite catchy as Dianu, but catchy enough.
Okay, yeah. So there we are. We've got all sorts of ideas there. Is there anything else
We
that
haven't heard from Ruth or
Oh, of course
Henriette.
we haven't. No, we saved the best till last. But how did I miss Ruth? Right,
Well,
Ruth.
Henriette
And
may
Henry.
have
We've only
something
done
to share.
Lytton so far.
We did Lytton and you jumped in.
That's because I thought we were going around the other way, and in fact we're going around that way. Except my head's mirrored, so it doesn't really work either way, does it? Right. So we'll go with Henriette. What have you found?
Oh dear. I thought if I am going to take it into the direction of the psalm and collective memory and stuff, I think the idea that Lytton came up with is great. But I was thinking to invite people for that week to bring in an old photograph and to share memories, because people find it easy to share memories of something that is important to them, and then it is easily linked to, well, this is how important it is to share our memories, collective memories of our faith story as well, because it begins to live for other people as well. And then maybe I, as the minister, collect pictures and images of church events from the past. So once people are in that mode of, oh, we have to speak in church, to then show them some pictures of the past events or past ministers, whatever. And, then the tongues are a little bit loose and hopefully built on that. But I also did think that if I was going to take it into the Ephesians reading, to somehow do a celebrating event of all the gifts in the church. So you can easily say, okay, I am already standing as the minister. So now let's have everybody stand who serves as an elder or serves as whatever, a church secretary, whatever, and to make sure that the list is so long and so inclusive that in the end, everybody stands. Then my wicked mind, my wicked, sinful mind went off to like, well, there will always be a few people who just refuse to stand. And then I thought, well, and I will just tell them, maybe you should have a good think about why you're not standing. So, I mean, that would be hugely unpastoral to do something like that, even though it can sometimes sound quite attractive to do it. So I am not really sure how to deal with that. I think it would be easy to include everyone, to at the very last time say, like, and anyone here who prays for friends or for the church or any, please stand. But if there would still be people sitting then, I don't know what to do then. So it would be something that really would require careful thinking through to make sure, and to how far you let that battle of wills go if there are people in the church who are just really going to refuse to stand up.
I always think I always think it's interesting to know which way round you do those lists, because we sometimes do that kind of thing, don't we? And we usually start with elders,
yeah,
treasurer, church secretary, and I wonder if that subliminally offers a message that these are the important ones, and eventually will hoover everybody up with the less important jobs. And I wonder what it would mean, because if you started at the other end, everybody would be standing up to start with, wouldn't they? That's the issue. That's why we have to have the fewer people standing up first, unless you get them to sit down and then stand up. Then it's quite an interesting question which way around you do it. So I didn't interrupt Henriette, but now Ruth's got something to say as well. So.
Well, I love the idea of standing. I've sometimes used this Iona song, isn't there? Stand, oh stand firm, which and see what the Lord can do, I think is the thing. And we did that with, oh, you prayers. So then stand up, oh, you singers, stand or stand firm. And then if there's still some people who haven't stood up, you just need the verse, oh, you sinners. And then everybody's standing. There you go.
Is that a gift?
Can be. Back to the flesh pots, maybe.
Sorry, Henry.
But I like that idea of, or actually your idea, Phil, to actually start with, okay, everyone, because the whole congregation will actually think of, oh, she's gonna start with the elders, and to actually shock that expectation out of people. I'm now thinking that maybe I would start with, okay, everyone who prays for the church, stand up. And then just have everyone stand up at the same time. And just bring it from there. I think that could actually be a more powerful illustration to do it that way. And to then go from there to how we all have a part in the body of Christ and how we're all knitted together. So yes, so that was another thing. The whole idea of being knitted together. And I thought it would be quite fun to show a clip of a human pyramid, if I can. Hang on. Why it's not going? Oh no. There we go.
Welcome to Indokai 2012.
That is very impressive.
Yeah, and to then just bring home that, I just love the teacher checking onto these kids at the bottom, like, are you still okay, and to then bring home that the ones who are actually carrying the most weight are the kids in the middle who are not even seen because they are, overtaken by the ones at the top, if you like. Whereas the person at the top, all he had to do was just climb to the top in effect, so that kind of idea of turning that upside down, like the ones that you don't see, that you don't hear about, they carry pretty much weight.
And there's
So,
the prima donna minister at the top there.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yay.
It's all about me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it'd be slightly bolder to just do it in your congregation.
Yes, well, kind of thought maybe not with my 80 plus.
You have to do the maths to know how many to start with at the bottom, so you use everybody in the pyramid and don't save 84-year-old Doris to the last, maybe. Oh, but in fact, don't have her in. Oh no! Oh, where would you put Doris? She'd have to be on the top, wouldn't she?
Not if they're all 80 plus. Then you have a problem.
You'd have to go up with the frame. That would work. There you go. That's really cool. Ruth, what have you dug out of your closet?
Well, because I was trying not to get unhelpful earworms into anybody's head, I've gone poetry. So here we go with we do need the sound because I'm not going to read it the author is going to read it. So everybody knows that I'm a little bit in love with Malcolm Guite, or at least with his poetry. So at the moment, I'm reading this book, which is David's Crown, Sounding the Psalms. And it's wonderful. He's written them all during lockdown. It's about corona meaning the crown thing that the virus looks like. We've kind of forgotten that perhaps. So he's used the Psalms as a crown. So he begins each poem about each psalm. He starts with the last line from the last one. And then the last line of the next one makes the first line of the next one, and so on. So they kind of, it weaves all around, like on the picture, which is a better way of describing it. But it's kind of woven Jesus into it. If you're thinking, how does he start? He starts Psalm 1 with the last line of the poem is written for Psalm 150, so that the whole thing comes back round full circle. And it's just wonderful. And with each one on his blog, you tend to be able to find a version of him reading it, and they're sonnets, so they have a particular form. The title, if you're wondering why he's gone all Latin, is just that's the title in books of Psalms. They tend to have the first couple of words in Latin. Don't let that put you off. The rest of the poem is in English, so I'll in a moment, that seems to be asking me to refresh something. That's kind of worrying, but in a moment I'll ask it to play, and then hopefully it'll play, and will scroll down the words so you can hopefully look at them as well. But it's Malcolm Guite's poem on Psalm. I've got to get the number right, 78. Sorry, I just couldn't read LXXV111 quick enough in my head to work out that is 78. So let's see if we can make Malcolm speak to us.
Attendite populi, a response to Psalm 78. He led me out of darkness into light, and now I will proclaim all he has done to rising generations. My delight will be to share the story of the one who came to me before I came to him, whose love still greets me with each rising sun. But neither will I hide my sin and shame, the many times that I refused his grace and turned my back on him, forgot his name, and sought my former darkness, turned my face away from my Redeemer. I'll confess my own perversity, and dare to trace my willful trespass in the wilderness, and how, through all of this, my Lord stayed true and pulled me through with patient tenderness.
And
Beautiful.
every time I read a Malcolm Guite poem or I hear him, I'm left with there's words. There's always a line. He pulled me through with patient tenderness. And going back to that idea I was talking about earlier about our relationship turning away from God, the idea that we don't even need to turn back, that Jesus pulls us through with patient tenderness. I shall carry that thought through today.
Should viewers or listeners go to the Talking Absolute Worship website, you can find it by typing Talking Absolute Worship into Google or other search engines. And then you will find our website, and we have a section in there called Places That We Like. And one of those is Malcolm Guite's blog. So you can find all of his stuff through there, along with many of the other places that we regularly mention. And it's updated every now and then when we discover new things, which is always great. So yeah, have a look on there if you want to find that. We also have future episodes of our videos for those who like to prepare further in advance than just the coming Sunday. You can see sort of about a couple of months into the future, which is amazing. So that's there as a resource for you to use. We've been talking absolute worship for the last hour, and we will all be wrestling with these texts as you will, and we will be preaching them this coming Sunday, or in various different contexts as you will be. And so to lead us in prayer and prepare us for that task, Ruth is going to pray with us.
Let us pray. Loving God, as we turn to you in prayer, it is enough to know that you always listen. when we struggle to lead your people in worship, it is enough to know that you speak through us. And when we wonder how your word impacts upon our life, it is enough to know that in Jesus you show us the way, the truth, and the life. So feed us till we want no more. In your name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.